We know sports.
Oh, baby, a right hand jam.
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig back here for a Hump Day Wednesday edition of Game Night. Busy show tonight here on 97.3 ESPN FM. And of course, we are live as always on YouTube and Twitter. Follow at 973 ESPN on both social platforms. And of course, you can DM the show and listen to the show through the 973 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. Dave Weinberg for a Weinberg Wednesday will join us coming up at 6:15 and get his perspective on the latest with the Eagles and in the sports world. Plus, Kevin McCormick will join us coming up at 6:40 tonight to talk about the Sixers as they open their season tonight. So we got a lot of stuff to get to here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. And as always, you can join the conversation as well. I'll hit on the Eagles stuff in just a moment, but I want to reiterate something that I brought up last night. You know, last night was an amazing night for basketball, and Mike Gill mentioned this earlier on the Sports Bash. You know, you have the debut of the latest version of the Lakers in the second game of the doubleheader versus the Warriors. You had the rematch between the Bucks and the Nets. And you had all these things happening last night. You know, they're starting to slowly reveal the 75th anniversary edition of the NBA's all 75 best players. Like, all these things are happening, right? And then Ben Simmons is still overshadowing things. And, you know, we talked about yesterday, we've talked about multiple times here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill hit on it even more in depth earlier today. The whole point with Ben Simmons is, to me, at the end of the day, until he admits that he has a problem, he can't get better, he won't be better, he'll never be more than what he is. Now, for whatever reason, Ben Simmons is okay with that. If you want to call it immaturity, you want to call it just lack of growth, whatever you want to call with it. But it's really shameful that we live in a world where the defending champions, reigning champions of the NBA, going against the prohibitive favorite for many people to win the NBA title, it's overshadowed by a dude who doesn't want to play basketball for whatever reason. And I understand there were mitigating circumstances. I understand that there are things going on in Ben Simmons' personal life. And we mentioned this before. I told you guys months ago that there was something wrong with Ben. This was before I knew what was specifically going on with his sister. This is after what I knew about his personal life in terms of his dating fiascos. All right. And I'll say it once, I'll say it twice, I'll say it 100 times. Ben Simmons needs help. A shrink, a psychologist, go grab a Bible and find Jesus, whatever it is. Ben Simmons needs help. But whatever help he needs to get is not an excuse for basically being the butt of jokes nationally. Ben Simmons has turned himself into such a lightning rod that it overshadowed what should have been us all talking about the debut of the NBA last night. And it's now overshadowing the debut of the Sixers tonight down in New Orleans. So I'm going to make you guys a promise right now. We are not going to spend an hour talking about Ben Simmons. That's my promise to you. And with that being said, we'll talk more Sixers with Kevin McCormick coming up at 6:40 tonight. Yeah, we will touch on Ben Simmons, but he will not be the primary focus of our conversation. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. If you want to have a laugh, though, go to 97.3ESPN.com and see the video where someone compared Ben Simmons to a very famous or infamous basketball player from the movie Coach Carter. If you want to have a good laugh, over at 97.3ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. On the Eagles front, the Eagles released their first injury report of the week, and they also made some protecting of guys on the practice squad. First of all, with the injury list, and this is significant, Lane Johnson was eliminated at practice due to rest. So it looks like Lane Johnson is on track to play this week. It looks like you're going to have the majority of the offensive line back together. You're going to have Lane back at right tackle, Mailata back at left. Kelsey, of course, is at center. And then you have the guard situation. And I'm going to assume right now that it's going to be Landon Dickerson still at left guard. He look way better at left guard than right guard. I don't know if that's just his personal comfort zone. I don't know if it's something to do with his footwork specifically, but he looks just all around better and more comfortable at left guard than right guard. Then, on top of that, I look over at the right guard, and I'm going to assume that Driscoll takes that spot because Herbig can be the backup for all the interior line positions. Anthony Harris, DNP for hands. Not fully sure what that means, but here's to hoping that Anthony Harris can go because he could be a key part of that team having a chance this week. Now, the big other move that happened in the last 24 hours, Richard Rodgers has been added to the practice squad. Remember, as was pointed out earlier on the Sports Bash, Dallas Goedert still hasn't been cleared from COVID protocols. So I don't know how severely sick he is, but I feel pretty comfortable saying that best case scenario, he just can't test negative yet, and he keeps having positive tests because the key to all this is you have to have 24-hour consecutive positive tests. So negative tests. So if Dallas Goedert tested negative today, he has to test negative again tomorrow, 24 hours apart, then he can come off the COVID list. But for right now, he has not had consecutive 24-hour separated negative tests, which is why Richard Rodgers was added to the practice squad. And remember, Tyree Jackson, his 24-day practice window has been opened, as well as Kavon Wallace. I don't know if we're going to see Tyree Jackson this Sunday, but I think we may see Richard Rodgers this week. There's a possibility it's Richard Rodgers and Jack Stoll out there for the Eagles. And then the other thing to keep an eye on, look at who the Eagles protected from the practice squad this week. LaRaven Clark, John Hightower, Elijah Riley, Noah Togiai. You're not protecting Togiai if you know you're having Dallas Goedert available this week. And you're not protecting LaRaven Clark if you're not 100% on your offensive line. And you're not protecting Elijah Riley if you're 100% sure that Anthony Harris is going this week. So these are some things to keep an eye on with the Eagles as we get ready for Eagles versus Raiders this Sunday. Coverage begins at 3 p.m. right here on your home for Eagles football in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig, hanging out with you. We'll get to your messages a little bit later in the show. But coming up next, we will talk with Dave Weinberg for another edition of Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. DM the show through the app. We'll check the text board as well at 609-403-0973. And the StreamYard is live at 973 ESPN on YouTube and Twitter.
This is the radio home for Philadelphia Eagles football. This Sunday, it's week 7 of the 2021 season with the Eagles headed to Vegas to face the Raiders.
He lets it fly, and an it's intercepted by Nelson. Stephen Nelson picks it off.
Pre-game coverage begins at 3 p.m. Maryland Mike call all the action starting at 4:05. This is where the Eagles play. 97.3 ESPN, South Jersey's Eagles station.
It's game time. Football season is in full swing, and you can catch all the NFL action at the FanDuel Sportsbook in Bally's Hotel and Casino, Atlantic City. It's time to get in on all the games you love. Experience sports betting done right with live streaming games, food and beverage, self-service betting kiosks, and more. Get your game face on and score big this weekend when you bet at FanDuel Sportsbook in Bally's off the boardwalk, Atlantic City. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig back here on Game Night. Busy show tonight here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Of course, we'll get to all your messages a little bit later this hour. Keep them coming in. 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Text board 609-403-0973. And I see messages coming in on YouTube as well. But before we do anything else, as always, we talk with Dave Weinberg each week for a Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, how you doing today?
Doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing well, all things considered. I say all things considered because let's be realistic, Dave. We all knew this day was coming, but Zach Ertz being traded last week, it just felt weird. The way the whole thing went down. We all saw the video of him crying on his way off the field Thursday night. And, you know, from reading your piece on 97.3 ESPN.com and listening to others, it kind of feels like that Philadelphia is turning into a town where it's like they don't appreciate you till you're gone kind of thing sometimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, Zach was a true class guy on and off the field. And you're right. Sometimes they don't realize what they missed until the people have departed. I mean, Zach was one of those guys that, like I wrote, who understood the culture of Philadelphia sports, understood the fan base, was willing to accept the criticism because when he deserved it, and never complained, never took his ball and ran away like Ben Simmons has done. He would face the music and then just try to do better next time. And I think the people appreciated him for it and actually grew to love him for it.
Excluding the play in his big game in the Super Bowl that the Eagles won, was there a moment or a thing that Zach Ertz did that was one of your favorites over the years?
Boy, that's a tough one. Not necessarily just one particular thing. It's just the way he conducted himself and carried himself on and off the field. Like I said, I mean, after games, he would not. He would always take the time to compose himself, to put on a suit and tie, which is a really classy move, and then address the media. You know, he took time to collect his thoughts about what he wanted to say. He didn't kind of rush things. He was just a classy guy, and he still is. And you know, the fact that all the stuff he did off the field for the community with him and his wife Julie and their charitable foundation was just fantastic. I got a kick out of his relationship with Mike Trout. We would always actually chat about it because they were actually very good friends. And Zach, as you remember, would often give Mike Trout the football after he scored touchdowns in that end zone. So that's kind of something that stood out for me. Mike being a local guy.
Who's going to give him a touchdown now? Who's going to be the guy to give Trout a touchdown now? Because I think everybody got traded, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that Carson was his hunting buddy and Zach was his good friend. And I don't know if he has any left. Yeah, he's going to have to buy one at the souvenir store like everybody else now, I guess.
Dave, now that Ertz is in Arizona, you know, I don't think Ertz turns them into a Super Bowl contender. I think they already were in that conversation. But you know, what do you think that Ertz can do for the Cardinals that, you know, maybe people are not emphasizing enough? But I think people forget. Listen, Ertz did catch a touchdown in his final Eagles game, which seemed very appropriate. And I think that Ertz is not washed. He is not done. He is not cooked. So, you know, what do you think a guy like Ertz brings to a high-powered offense already like the Cardinals?
Yeah, like you said, and there's another weapon for them, for Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury to have at their disposal. And again, as we've often mentioned, he's another veteran presence in that locker room, which you can never get enough of. But just being a productive player and a productive leader, I think really helps them out.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN for another edition of Weinberg Wednesday. Give him a follow on Twitter at Dave Weinberg 19. Check out his extra point columns over at 97.3ESPN.com. Now, Dave, we got to talk about the fact that the Eagles. They played Thursday night. They had a whole extra several days off to nitpick and figure it out. But I got to ask you, is the 10 days actually going to benefit them? Because let's be realistic. I'm still waiting for Sirianni to get his ostrich head out of the sand.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope that the extra time would be a benefit, that they would have done a little bit more self-scouting and try to figure out what went wrong. I guess we'll find out on Sunday. I mean, I was leaning toward maybe thinking they could probably upset the Raiders, but now I don't think so. After seeing how Las Vegas played in Denver last Sunday, they look really impressive to me. I know I've seen various power rankings, and some people have them as high as 10th, which tells me that being at home, the Eagles have 2 wins on the road, but I just don't think they're going to get this one. I just don't know that there's enough. You could give them 2 weeks of a bye, and it still wouldn't be enough, I don't think.
See, one of my concerns, I said this early in the season, and I don't know how true or not true this is, but it's part of me that's wondering, is every team that goes to Vegas this year part of like an experiment because of the fact that no one played games in Vegas before? We always hear about the Miami flu. Teams go down to Miami, have too good of a time. Happened to the Eagles a couple of years ago. Remember, they lost to the Dolphins down there. So there's a part of me that thinks young coaching staff, young team, they might be susceptible. That's one of my biggest worries about this game. I'm wondering, I'm not worried about Jalen Hurts. I'm not worried about guys like him. I'm worried about the other guys. He may drop back for a pass, throw the ball, and maybe, fill in the blank receiver drops the ball because maybe he had too much fun the night before.
I don't know if that'll be a reason. I mean, teams do a pretty good job of limiting that kind of stuff in terms of curfews, and the players really don't have that all that, especially if you fly out on a Saturday, which I think they're doing. They don't have a whole lot of time to enjoy the sights, if you will. I just think that maybe the crowd might be a factor. I mean, the Raiders fans, they were notoriously loud and boisterous in Oakland, and I can imagine they probably carried that over to Vegas too. I mean, once you're a Raiders fan, you're a Raiders fan for life, and it doesn't matter where you're playing. And I don't know if it's the same as the Black Hole in Oakland, but I imagine it's going to be a pretty rowdy atmosphere. Unlike when they won in Atlanta and they won in Carolina, they're not going to outnumber Raiders fans in Vegas. So I think that's going to be the bigger challenge, as opposed to staying out late at the craps tables or what have you.
Another big item of news is Lane Johnson is finally back. He finally spoke up about what was going on with him. And, it's kind of like I told people before, Dave, my opinion was always don't assume anything until Lane speaks. Lane will tell you when he's ready what's going on. And I got to give Lane credit. It takes a lot of guts to admit those things about yourself in public. People don't realize that, someone admitting something like that, it's still very taboo in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. I'm willing to guess that he probably talked to Brandon Brooks about this, who he not only plays next to, but their lockers are adjacent to each other. They're very good friends, and as we saw a couple of years ago, where Brandon was very open about his struggles with anxiety and the quest for perfection that actually forced him to miss a couple games, forced him out of a couple games. And it's a very serious issue. It probably doesn't get talked about often enough. Athletes are always viewed with this invincibility about them, this suit of armor that they're not supposed to be subject to these kind of things. They're not supposed to be human. But as we've often found out, they're just like you and me when it comes to dealing with various mental, emotional issues. And it's really congrats to him and kudos to him for being willing to step up and acknowledge it and to seek help for it.
That's the key word you said, that they're still human beings. And I think so many times we live in a world because of social media and the celebrity culture that we take these people and we idolize them. We put them on this unattainable level, and we forget they're still human beings. They still have lives. They still have things they go through. And, Dave, you've been around tons of athletes in your years covering sports, from football to boxing to all kinds of levels. And these people are still human beings. They still get happy when they win. They still get sad when they lose. And at the end of the day, they still have things going on in their personal lives that, whether the fan going to the sports book or what their fantasy team likes or not, those things still affect them.
Yeah, I mean, it's they do get held up, they get put up on pedestals, and I can understand that to a point. You do have your favorite team and your favorite players, and you're rooting hard for them, and you're disappointed when they let you down. But yeah, you do have to remember that they're going home at night just like you are from your job, and they have families that they have to take care of. They have their own issues that they have to deal with, and just because you get paid a whole lot of money, then maybe that increases the pressure, which I can understand that too. But yeah, they just because you're a professional athlete doesn't make you immune to society's issues and troubles. And as we're finding out, more and more athletes, musicians, actors are coming forward with admitting that they have these kind of things that they have to deal with.
Dave, I mentioned boxing. I didn't want to not neglect for a second straight week. We've got to talk about Wilder Fury last week.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, because now I'll admit it, I didn't watch the fight live. I watched the replay the next day.
Same.
Okay, so I went and watched the movie that night. Okay, I went and saw the Bond movie that night instead of watching Fury Wilder. But for me, I went back and watched it on the replay the next day, and while it was a cool fight and I enjoyed it, I gotta wonder, where does that really fall in the history of heavyweight boxing? Because I'm sorry, I just don't look at Fury and Wilder, Dave, on the same level as any of the greats of all time.
No, I mean, I heard some people, commenting that Fury might be, the best heavyweight ever because of his size and all that stuff. No, sorry, no. He's not, until he can, you obviously it'll never happen. But I mean, I think Lennox Lewis doesn't get enough credit for what he accomplished. Larry Holmes, same thing. Mike Tyson, same thing. Although I think he might have been able to beat Mike because of his sheer size and would not be intimidated by him. But I mean, Vladimir Klitschko, he was also 6'7", 6'8". So I don't think that Tyson would be able to just have his way with those guys. And he didn't really. I mean, I got to give him credit for beating, even essentially beat Deontay twice and maybe 3 times. And so he deserves credit for being for accomplishing his goal and being undefeated. But if you go back and even a little bit earlier, there was an age of heavyweights where you had Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, those kind of guys where they kind of had to run the gamut. They were in a big fight almost every time they stepped in the ring, other than Fury, Wilder, maybe Anthony Joshua, who just got exposed a couple of weeks ago. There really isn't any top tier heavyweight to challenge these guys. So until they can face like a real challenge, and then I'm not willing to give them the credit as far as being even considered like an all-time best kind of guy.
I mean, for goodness sake, I'm at the point where after watching that fight, and people talked about it afterward, Dave, no offense to either Wilder or Fury, but can we go back in a time machine and get Lyle Alzado and put him in the ring and see what happens? I mean, he at least looked decent against Muhammad Ali, for goodness sake. I mean, no offense to Fury and Wilder. I just think people are just so ignorant of history.
Yeah, I mean, there was a golden age where the heavyweights ruled the boxing world, and we really ruled the athletic world. I mean, if you were the heavyweight champion, you were the top dog as far as sports, more than football, more than baseball. And people, I think it's probably, there's a couple generations that probably don't realize that because football and baseball and basketball become so big that they don't remember the time when boxing was probably one of the 3 most popular sports, along with, believe it or not, baseball, boxing, and horse racing were the 3 top sports back in the day. I mean, way back in the day, but. Yeah, it's they I don't think they just don't have any clue about what it was really like back then. I would recommend Russell Peltz, who's a local promoter, Philadelphia promoter, lives in Ventnor. He just came out with a new book about his 50 years as a promoter called $30 and a Cut Eye. And I'm actually halfway through, and it's an excellent book. It does a great job of capturing what boxing used to be, and I would highly recommend that for people that really want to, take a look back at take a look back at the sport.
Dave Weinberg joining us for a Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN at Dave Weinberg 19 on Twitter. Dave, you mentioned baseball before I let you go.
Sure.
Right now, we were at the Final Four of baseball. Right now, the Houston Astros and the Boston Red Sox are playing.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta's playing the Dodgers tonight. Folks, you hear that game after the Sixers here on 97.3 ESPN. Of the four teams left, if you had to pick one that you want to, not who you think will, who you would want to win the World Series, who would that be?
Braves. I'm a big Giants fan, as I've often said, so I can't stand the Dodgers. Stinking Bellinger last night tied it up and helped them win, gave them some new life. And Boston, and Houston, they've been there before. They've won it, a number of times, and both have that kind of little asterisk next to their accomplishments. So I'm not rooting for either one of them. But Atlanta, they're doing it right. They're doing it with young kids, even without Acuna, who's going to be back next year. So yeah, I'm rooting for Atlanta to get it done.
He's Dave Weinberg. Give him a follow on Twitter at Dave Weinberg 19. Extra point column over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Definitely check out the one on Zach Ertz. A really great perspective and feel from Dave on
Thanks.
one of the all-time great Eagles over there on the extra point column. Dave, always appreciate the conversation, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. Take care.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM. Of course, as promised, we'll get some of your guys' thoughts and comments right now. Of course, you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. Also, text coming in, 609-403-0973. Joey D. Inventor chimes in, says, Josh, do you think if the Sixers would have a championship by now if they drafted Jason Tatum the year after Ben was drafted? That's from Joey D. Inventor. Joey D., here's the thing. If I'm just to remove everything I know about that year's draft and answer that question very specifically, I don't know if they have a championship, but I think they would have at least gotten to the Eastern Conference Finals at minimum and maybe even gotten to the NBA Finals. I think Tatum is that much of a difference maker in terms of a scorer. Now, the problem is if you would have drafted Tatum, I mean, I don't know. Would you have Tobias Harris now? Would you have ever traded for Jimmy Butler? Would Butler have stayed with Tatum and then would have traded Ben Simmons? There's so many variables to go into that. And the reason why I say all this is because Joey D. Inventor, it's a good question. But here's one of the problems to go along with it. I think the only reason why the Colangelo Boston trade happened was because the Sixers were dead set on drafting Fultz, and Boston knew it. I think Boston all along was going to draft Tatum. I'm thoroughly convinced of that. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but I'm personally convinced that Boston was always going to draft Tatum. So to me, they would not have traded that pick if it meant the Sixers were drafting Tatum. That's my personal perspective. That's what I think was going to happen. And with that being said, like I said, there's so many things that happened after the Fultz pick, the Butler trade, the Harris trade. There's so many things that happened. If you would have had Tatum, how different would this team have looked by now? It's an interesting road to go down. Then one more text. Tom in Margate says, Josh, I will repeat this. Ben Simmons is a cancer on the Sixers team and for the city. Trade him. That's from Tom in Margate, throwing in the smile emoji at the end of the text. Listen, Tom, Ben has become more trouble than he's worth, in my opinion. And we'll ask, coming up next, Kevin McCormick, who covers the 76ers, joins us next to get more into Ben Simmons, but not all about Ben Simmons, because we do have actually players playing on the court tonight. Kevin McCormick will join us next. Sixers beat writer for Clutch Sports joins us right here on Game Night with yours truly, Josh Hennig, on 97.3 ESPN.
It's Sixers basketball tonight on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
The catch, the shot, the three, swing.
The Sixers travel to New Orleans to face the Pelicans. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN. South Jersey's play-by-play home for the 76ers.
GMF approval.
You've probably heard the used cars are currently in great demand, but then some dealers go ahead with ridiculously low offers for your trade. Well, at Bennett Chevy, we don't care what others tell you. This month only, our offers start at a minimum $8,000. Even if your trade's towed to our lot, we'll give you a minimum $8,000 for any old clunker, rattle trap, or rust bucket towards any pre-owned vehicle in stock. And if we pay a minimum $8,000 for junk, just imagine how much more Bennett will pay for a nice, clean, good running vehicle. Just grab your title or payment book and get to Bennett Chevy to get the most for your trade. And we'll buy your vehicle even if you don't buy one of ours. Need to get out of a lease early? Bennett is your all brands lease return center. No strings, no obligations. Just the best offers you'll find anywhere. And a non-commissioned sales staff paid based on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night, here on 97.3, being brought to you by the folks over at FanDuel Sportsbook at Bally's Casino in Atlantic City. Bet all the action and style this football season at the state-of-the-art FanDuel Sportsbook just off the boardwalk at Bally's in Atlantic City. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. You know, the Sixers, 8 o'clock tonight, Central Division, so you got some time. You want to go watch the game. Maybe you slide in over to Atlantic City, throw a bet down or two, have a good weekend or night at least out there. Or the weekend, doesn't matter when you want to go over there. Sixers tonight at 8 p.m. as mentioned on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin McCormick covers the 76ers for Clutch Points. I completely messed up the name on my first try there. And of course, I would, because my name is Josh Hennig, and sometimes I read things and I don't see things in the order that they're said in. So Kevin McCormick joins us right now here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, formerly contributor for the 76ers, covered the Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.com. And now he's with Clutch Points, the Clutch Points app. Kevin, how you doing today?
Josh, I'm doing great. How about yourself? It's good to be back.
It's good to have you back. So let's get the stupid stuff out of the way, okay? Because I said this earlier, the fact that people spend so much time talking about Ben Simmons the last 2 days is an insult to the fact that we had the defending champions debut last night and just smack the Nets in the face to the point where Giannis didn't play for 6 minutes in the first quarter. They were so done. I mean, the other Antetokounmpo, Giannis, was out there running around for 6 minutes instead of Giannis, for goodness sake. And then LeBron and the new look, well, kind of new look Lakers versus the Warriors. They got overshadowed by Ben Simmons. So, Kevin, what's going on? What is going to happen? Give us your perspective on this soap opera.
It feels like things are really steadily approaching a breaking point. It's actually something I wrote about yesterday, just that the Sixers, I have to applaud them for the way they've conducted themselves. I know when you see and hear quotes of guys talking about how everything's just kind of been business as usual and there's been no difference since Ben Simmons has returned. In reality, that's kind of how it's been, getting the small glimpse of practice over the past week since Ben has been there. There hasn't really been much difference other than his presence. So while it may kind of seem like mumbo jumbo of guys just saying what's supposed to be said, that's how it's been for the most part, which I feel like brings a different light to Doc Rivers finally deciding to remove Ben Simmons from practice on Tuesday because of just his antics. It's clear that even though he's back, his motives haven't changed. He's going to try and go the Harden route. We're going to see some sandbagging of him trying to continue to force Daryl Morey to get a deal done, but he still remains patient. That the goal of the team still remains the same, of waiting for a deal that's going to put them in a better position to contend for a title, and that Daryl Morey is not going to trade Ben Simmons just for the sake of doing so.
Here's the thing, if I can just be a devil's advocate, the difference was that Harden still showed up and played at some point, right? You know what I mean? Anthony Davis was still a good soldier and tried to do and say the right things at the end of the day, right? Jimmy Butler, yeah, he had that infamous interview with Rachel Nichols, but he still went out and played basketball when they let him. So to me, Ben is like a whole new level. We've never seen this before in the NBA, where a dude is literally sabotaging his own value. I don't think Ben understands that when he says and does the thing that he does, it's a bad look. So yeah, you want to get traded, but you're not helping your case.
Exactly. That's the weirdest angle of it all, is that in the end of the day, a trade is what he wants, but all he's done since, game 7 against Atlanta is destroy his value. He threatened to hold out. Now that he's back and he's getting removed from practice because he's not physically and mentally engaged. So it's so bizarre that a player that wants to be traded is doing nothing to help himself to get closer to what he wants, because someone has to be in his ear at this point telling him, hey, if you go play for a couple of weeks and remind everybody how special of a talent you are, it might help, getting a trade done. Because here's the thing, Ben Simmons is still under contract for 4 years. If you're another team seeing the way he's acting now, I feel like it's scaring some front offices, because you see how fast things can turn on a dime and how he acts when things aren't going his way. So if you're a team that acquires him this season, what's to stop him 2 years from now doing a similar situation when things go sour at wherever he's moved to next? So yeah, you hit it right on the nose of that. While Ben Simmons still wants to trade, he's doing absolutely nothing to help his cause of getting one.
Kevin, my opinion is, and unless someone convinces me otherwise, I believe Ben Simmons will be traded sometime between the middle of December and the trade deadline, because I think it's either December 12th or 15th is the day that you can start trading guys who got signed in the offseason. I think that's going to be the key. By then, there's going to be a team or two that's desperate. Maybe somebody starts out 6-15, or someone has an injury, goes down, they're only sitting at 500. And I think that's when somebody says, okay, we acquired this guy in the offseason. Maybe he's not working out. You call a third or fourth team, make it a huge fiasco kind of trade, and then the deal gets done. I think that's the range when Ben Simmons gets traded. Do you agree or disagree?
I could agree to that, because that's part of the reason why Daryl Morey has remained patient now, even into the season, is that you're waiting for a team to stumble out of the gates, or on the reverse end, maybe a team has a pretty good start and they feel like they're one piece away from really getting themselves into a playoff spot. So then they go and try and trade for a player like Ben Simmons. And then, like you mentioned, you have to wait the 90 days for players who are recently signed to be aggregated in new deals. In reality, I mean, it could happen whenever, but I would say the trade deadline is going to be the true make or break if Ben Simmons is still on this roster, because then Daryl Morey has to make the decision of, do we want this cloud still hanging over our head while we gear up for a postseason push? And by that point, you'll have a clear indicator of what form of Ben Simmons you're going to have, if he's even appearing in games. So that is going to be the real make or break of, do we get a deal done and get some pieces to get ready for the playoffs, or are we going to, just try this whole thing again in the offseason?
Kevin McCormick from Clutch Points joins us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at Kevin MCC NBA. Check out all of his coverage of the Sixers and NBA. Kevin, let's talk about who's on the court tonight. Obviously, the Sixers are down in New Orleans. To me, tonight is a very interesting game to find out about one guy. I don't think we talked enough about this offseason. Tobias Harris. Tobias had an amazing season, should have been an all-star. But let's be realistic. In the Hawks series, he had some really rough games. And to me, I want to find out, what does Tobias Harris look in another year where he had a full offseason on the same team, not being traded, not having to move himself. He's 29 years old now. He's supposed to be in the prime of his career. How big is tonight and this season for Tobias?
I would say it's a big one. Obviously, that could change depending on what happens with a Ben Simmons trade. If they can acquire another all-star talent to where he kind of goes back to being the quote-unquote third star of the team. But until then, I mean, this is a guy, he's one of the more tenured guys on the roster. When you think about the Sixers now and you think about their leaders, you think Joel Embiid, you think Tobias Harris, because like you said, Tobias Harris had a career year last year, averaged just under 20 points per game on just shy of 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. Stuff like that doesn't happen by accident. This is a guy who's continued to grow his game. I think we're going to see him maybe try and take another step as a facilitator to ease the loss of Ben Simmons' facilitation. I think the relationship that he has with Doc Rivers is another factor of that, of them coming in together. A whole nother season to work with, a full off season will help as well. And just, can he continue to be that, that Robin to Joel Embiid's Batman that we saw last season through the regular season? Because that worked a lot. That two-man game They were very effective together. So I agree with you. I think he is a big guy to watch now. And if he can continue to build on what he did last season, or if, it was just kind of one of those career years that will be kind of a one and done thing.
What is a fair expectation for Tyrese Maxey in his second year?
That's so tough to say. I mean, if he can hold his own and be an everyday rotation guy, listen, we know he can score in bunches, and no moment is too big for him. This was a 19-year-old who in his rookie season, with no summer league, with minimal training camp, with barely being in the rotation throughout the regular season, was thrown to the Wolves in the postseason and shined. So I don't want to get too over the edge with Tyrese Maxey, but I think him proving that he is a more than reliable everyday guard in this league is a more than reasonable expectation in year 2.
Who is the one player on the Sixers that people need to keep an eye on that they're not talking enough about right now?
I'd have to say Seth Curry. I mean, just because when you look back to last postseason, there's a real argument that Seth Curry was the second best player on the Sixers. He was absolutely unreal. Continues to be a phenomenal piece playing off Joel Embiid. A lot of people compared him to JJ Redick in terms of role, and I think he can be more than that. And now with no Ben Simmons, you're going to need more shot creation, more people on the ball. And I think Seth Curry is one of those guys who showed that, while he might only be that high quality role player type of guy, he could still thrive in a system that's based around a center like Joel Embiid just because of how compatible their games are and what a compliment he is to Embiid. So I think with more opportunity to go around and seeing the way he elevated his game and having a full offseason to work with these guys, he definitely is that guy who could be the X factor.
Sixers basketball tonight, 8 p.m. Tom McGinnis on the call right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. He's Kevin McCormick. Follow him on Twitter at KevinMCC NBA for all your Sixers and NBA coverage. And he writes for the Sixers over at Clutch Points and the Clutch Points app, formerly with 97.3 ESPN.com. Kevin, always good to talk with you. Enjoy the game tonight. And hopefully this Ben Simmons stuff can quiet down so we actually can enjoy real basketball.
Let's be real. It's not going away anytime soon.
I can always hope, okay? I can always hope, all right?
I applaud you for your optimism.
Kevin, take care of yourself, my friend.
All right, Josh. Good to see you.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Listen, I'm just fatigued like all of us are with the Ben Simmons stuff. We're all fatigued. We're all tired. Let's be realistic. None of us are really enjoying having these conversations day in and day out, week in and week out. But hopefully, at least for one night, we can cut down on the garbage and just focus on basketball. Speaking of basketball, Jeff over on the YouTube channel chimed in and says, Ben Simmons got to find somebody that cares for his best interest. Jeff, the problem is I don't think Ben Simmons understands what is in his best interests. I think part of the problem is that Ben Simmons doesn't understand that what is going on in his life, he's not helping himself. What is going on in his professional and personal life, none of it will be solved. None of it will fully get better. None of it will be truly resolved unless he steps outside of the bubble he has placed himself in. We live in a world where people want to be surrounded by yes people. They only follow people they agree with on social media. They surround themselves with people who only think like them. They never talk to anybody who thinks, looks, or acts different than them. And Ben Simmons is no different in that category. Until Ben Simmons opens up himself to somebody different, he will never change. I'm Josh Hennig, at Josh Hennig on Twitter. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers basketball, 8 p.m. tonight.